"Don't leave tonight," the shy maid cried. The Mafia boss froze when he saw what waited outside. In the Moretti mansion, perched on the snowy edge of the Alps, where clouds coiled like incense smoke over an altar of power, silence was worth more than any prayer. There, among glass and steel, Damian Moretti ruled his world not with guns, but with information, the kind that could destroy empires with a single keystroke. They called him the Serpent of Zurich, a man who could see 10 moves ahead in any game. Beneath the polished mask of a tech magnate, he was the unseen master of a private intelligence empire, a network that controlled the city's flow of data, money, and lives hidden beneath the glow of civilization. Damian trusted no one, no partners, no friends, no lovers. In his world, silence wasn't golden, it was survival. Tonight, that silence felt heavier than usual. The wind screamed through the windows, carrying the bite of an approaching blizzard. In the dim golden light, his reflection stretched across the marble corridor. A tall, broad-shouldered man, his face carved in shadow, untouched by warmth or mercy. He was preparing for a crucial meeting, a secret negotiation with neutral factions to tighten his grip on the city's trade routes. 10 minutes until the armored car arrived. 5 minutes until departure. In Damian Moretti's life, every second was measured in blood. But as he stepped out of his office, a faint movement at the far end of the hall caught his attention. A small, fragile figure stood there in the half-light. Clara Bennett, the data archivist no one ever noticed. In 6 months, he had never heard her voice. She existed like a shadow, appearing, working, vanishing. And yet, tonight, she stepped out of the darkness. Her hands trembled, her eyes wide with terror, yet burning with strange determination. She reached out, blocking his path, something no one in this house had ever dared to do. Damian tilted his head slightly, the pale gray of his eyes cutting through the gloom like a blade. One wrong word could erase her from existence. She drew in a shaky breath and forced the words out. "Don't leave the house tonight." 4 simple words. Yet they fell into the silence like a muted gunshot. The air thickened, still and suffocating. Damian stared at her, frowning slightly. She wasn't begging, she was commanding. A nameless woman, a ghost in his system, had just uttered a phrase that threatened the fragile control on which his empire stood. In that moment, Damian Moretti didn't yet know that the trembling whisper of that invisible girl would become the spark of the greatest storm of his life, one not born outside his fortress of steel, but from the impossible secret hiding behind her terrified eyes. For a few breathless seconds after those words, Damian's world froze. No wind, no hum of the heaters, only the soft, terrified rhythm of the girl's heartbeat filling the space between them. He looked at Clara as though weighing whether to kill her or to listen. With Damian Moretti, silence was always the herald of danger, and those eyes, cold as tempered steel, could make even the bravest man flinch. She lowered her head, hands clenched tight, voice trembling at the edge of breaking. "Please, don't go. They're waiting for you outside. If you leave the house tonight, you won't come back." Damian said nothing. He took one slow step toward her, the click of his shoes on marble sharp as a gun's hammer cocking. Behind him, Marco Rinaldi, his head of security, shifted slightly, hand brushing the grip of his weapon. "What are you talking about, Bennett?" Damian's voice was low, flat, and deadly calm. "Who sent you?" Clara shook her head, hair falling to hide half her face. "No one, I just heard them. To the east, near the cliffs. They talked about the road, the bend they called the Serpent's Coil." A pause, thick and cutting. Damian froze. The Serpent's Coil, that treacherous curve on the mountain road leading into the city. One misstep there could send a car plunging into the abyss. How could this woman possibly know that? Marco scoffed, stepping forward. Impossible. The perimeter's sealed. Thermal and motion sensors sweep it 24/7. But Damian wasn't listening to him anymore. There was something in the girl's eyes, something he recognized, not deceit, pure, unfiltered fear. "What exactly did you hear?" he asked quietly. Clara swallowed hard, fighting to steady her voice. "They said your car is a fortress on wheels, but it doesn't matter, because the ground will open beneath it." The words hit like ice water. Marco exchanged a look with his boss, his expression shifting from disbelief to alarm. Damian felt a chill crawl up his spine. The ground opening up, it could only mean one thing: buried explosives. His mind raced. Maybe it was a trap, a psychological game from a rival. Yet there was something about Clara's tone, a tremor that spoke not of lies but of the raw, instinctive terror of someone who had truly seen death coming. Damian signaled sharply, "Marco, check the eastern perimeter. Use the thermal drones, now." Marco obeyed and vanished down the corridor. Damian turned back, closing the distance between them until only a breath separated them. "You understand that if you're lying," he murmured, "you won't survive the night." Clara lifted her gaze. Fear still shimmered there, but beneath it, something steadier burned. Desperate conviction. "I know." He studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. "Cancel the meeting," he ordered coldly. "All operations are suspended until further notice." Outside, snow began to fall, silent, relentless, blurring the edges of the night. Damian stood motionless in the dim light of the corridor. The girl before him, someone he had never once noticed, had just done what no man in the criminal underworld dared to do. She had changed Damian Moretti's mind. And in that moment, he knew tonight would not be like any night that came before. Snow kept falling outside, the flakes melting against the glass like scratches of time. Damian stood motionless in the corridor, his gaze steady, but a quiet storm raged beneath his calm. Clara was still there, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Between them, the air thickened into silence, heavy with something unspoken. And when Damian finally moved, his steps carried them both down into the depths of truth. He descended to the control room, the steel heart of the Moretti estate. The hallways shimmered under pale white light, machines humming softly like a nervous heartbeat. Marco Rinaldi was already waiting, snow still on his coat, his face drawn tight in the green glow of the monitors. "Nothing, sir," Marco said, voice clipped with frustration. "I swept the entire eastern perimeter. Cameras, sensors, radar, clean, completely clean." Damian didn't answer. He approached the console, eyes cold as iron, gesturing for playback. On a wall of monitors, the eastern gardens came alive, silent, motionless, disturbingly still. Under infrared light, even the air seemed dead. "Too clean," Damian murmured. "Nothing is the most suspicious thing of all." Behind him, Clara clung to the edge of the table. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She didn't know if she was trembling from fear or from the terrifying thought that she might have just gambled her life on faith. "You said you heard them where?" Damian's voice cut through the low hum. "Near the old fountain, by the eastern cliffs." Her words wavered. They spoke in Old Calabrian, one voice rough and deep, another younger. I remember every word. "Serpent's coil, and the ground will open beneath the wheels." He turned to her, eyes narrowing. In the green light, his face looked sculpted from steel. "Old Calabrian?" he repeated quietly. Clara nodded. "My grandmother taught me. Not many people understand it anymore." Marco crossed his arms, skeptical. Maybe she misheard, or someone's trying to scare her. "Enough," Damian snapped, his tone slicing the air. "Pull up the original blueprints, the unscanned archives." He bent over the console, calling up the oldest files in the system, faded wartime schematics. Lines flickered onto the screen, pale and ghostly. Then his eyes stopped. A faint mark, barely visible, ran beneath the old fountain and out toward the forest. "Auxiliary service tunnel," he muttered. Forgotten for 80 years. Marco leaned closer, stunned. "Impossible. The security grid never detected it." "That's because no one ever looked back far enough," Damian replied, a mirthless edge in his voice. He switched to the internal comm. "Alpha team, move to the eastern fountain. Scan for hollow ground, temperature variance. Report live." Clara stepped back, her palms slick with sweat. Every second stretched thin, each one a heartbeat too long. On the screens, armed figures appeared, dark silhouettes cutting across the snow. Wind howled through their microphones. 5 minutes, 10. Then the drone feed flickered to life, a winding stretch of asphalt, a stone bridge, and just beyond the curve named Serpent's Coil. 2 rectangular heat signatures glowing crimson under the snow. "Jesus Christ," Marco breathed. "Military-grade explosives, 2 charges buried deep." Silence consumed the room. Damian's jaw tightened. Slowly, he turned his gaze toward Clara. In his eyes, the doubt was gone. Only realization remained. A nameless girl had just saved his life, and perhaps the empire he ruled. A wave of fury and cold dread surged through him. Not for the threat outside, but for the fact that someone had breached his fortress without him knowing. His voice dropped, low and metallic. "Double security. Seal every exit. No one leaves until I say so." Clara didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the monitors, her breath trembling in the pale light. And in that moment, Damian Moretti understood a truth sharper than steel. Every camera can be fooled, every fortress breached, but a single honest whisper never lies. When the technical team confirmed the explosives were disarmed, silence fell over the control room. Only the faint wind outside and the cold blue glow of the monitors remained, painting Damian Moretti's face in ghostly light. No longer calm, but carved with quiet turmoil. He looked at Clara for a long time, as though trying to read her heartbeat. The small, fragile woman who had just saved him from a death that was supposed to be certain. But instead of relief, he felt something else, unease, sharp and disquieting. "Leave us," he said. His voice was low but final. Marco hesitated only a second before leading the others out. The steel door shut behind them with a soft hiss. The silence that followed was heavy, almost alive. Damian circled her slowly, a predator measuring distance. "Do you know what this means, Bennett?" Clara lowered her head. "I only told you what I heard." "No one breaches my systems," he said quietly, each word heavy as lead. "No one outside my walls knows my roots, my codes, or that road's name." "Do you know what that makes me think?" She lifted her gaze, eyes wide, trembling. But beneath the fear was something older, deeper. "I don't work for anyone," she said, voice breaking. "I just heard them. They spoke in Old Calabrian. I understood because my grandmother taught me. She used to say," her voice softened, distant. "She used to say some secrets must be hidden in words no one remembers, a language for those who need to survive." Damian stopped. His expression darkened, thoughtful. "A language for survival," he repeated. "Interesting." Clara clasped her hands tightly. "I wasn't trying to interfere. I just thought, if I stayed silent, you'd die." He stared at her longer than he should have. In the sterile light, his eyes reflected her face, a pale blur, but something in it held him. He stepped closer, his tone low, measured. "You know, Bennett, in my world, no one acts without a reason, not even kindness." She met his gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe my reason was fear." "Or something else?" he asked softly. Silence. Only the hum of the monitors filled the space between them. She didn't answer. Damian exhaled, turning away. "Whatever it was," he said, "tonight you've made me owe you." He pressed a button on the console. The door opened and 2 guards entered. "Take her to the West Wing," Damian ordered, eyes still fixed on the monitor, showing the road where death had waited. "Guest suite 2, no contact, no exit. She's a witness, and until I know who I'm really dealing with, she's an asset." Clara's lips parted as if to speak, but Damian had already turned away. He didn't want to look at her again, or maybe he was afraid that if he did, he would believe her. As the door closed behind her, blue light shimmered across Damian's eyes. He leaned against the console, fists tightening. A cold thought echoed in his mind. A woman who speaks a dead language, a whisper that outsmarted my fortress. Coincidence or a key? For the first time in years, Damian Moretti didn't know who was in control, her or himself. That night, snow blanketed the Moretti mansion, but Damian never left his office. The monitors bathed his face in a cold, shifting light. His features no longer just sharp, but quietly haunted. Since Clara had been moved to the West Wing, he hadn't seen her again. Yet her image, her trembling voice, those fearful but defiant eyes, lingered in his mind. Not because she was beautiful, but because she was unexplainable. A ghost in flesh. A woman who spoke a dead language and heard what no one else could. Damian didn't believe in coincidences. He ordered the system to retrieve every trace of Clara Bennett's existence. Birth records, education, employment, medical files, bank data. Within minutes, the illusion unraveled. Birth certificate, fake, parental records, fabricated. University degree, linked to a student who died 10 years ago. Clara Bennett had existed for only 6 years. Before that, nothing. He stared at the cascading data, unmoving. He had exposed traitors, toppled spy networks, dismantled entire operations, but never encountered a ghost this perfectly made. He contacted an old ally, Enzo Ferretti, a former Italian intelligence officer who owed him a debt. By dawn, Enzo sent back an encrypted file. When Damian opened it, his face darkened. A black and white photograph, grainy with age. A little girl, maybe 5, with bright curls and solemn eyes. Beneath it, a name, Isabella Rossi, born 1998, Palermo. The Rossi family, a name whispered like myth in the underworld. Once rulers of southern Italy, they were annihilated nearly 20 years ago by Raphael D'Amato, the drug lord and Damian's greatest rival. The Rossis had vanished, erased from history. No survivors until now. Damian leaned back slowly, hand tightening on the edge of the desk. He stared at the photograph, then at the false file of Clara Bennett. The puzzle pieces slid into place. Her grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Some secrets must be kept in a language no one remembers. She hadn't just taught her an ancient tongue, she had buried her identity inside it. Isabella Rossi, not just his savior, but the last living heir of a bloodline destroyed by D'Amato, the same man now plotting to crush the Moretti empire. A faint smile touched Damian's lips, but there was no joy in it, only irony. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. The woman he'd locked away for his safety might just be the key to the war he'd been fighting all his life. He rose, walked to the window, and looked toward the distant west wing. One window there glowed faintly gold through the snow, a fragile spark against the endless white. "Isabella Rossi," he murmured, his breath fogging the glass. "Perhaps you weren't sent to save me. Perhaps you were sent to unlock the past I've spent my whole life trying to bury." Snow fell like fragments of memory, blanketing the iron railings, the roof, and the frozen silence of the Moretti estate. The night was so cold, even time seemed to stop. In the west wing, Clara stood by the window, her hands pressed to the glass. The city below faded into mist. Everything was still, except her heartbeat, slow and heavy, pulsing with confusion. She hadn't seen Damian since that night. No thanks, no questions, only silence and locked doors. Yet what haunted her wasn't the confinement, but the way he had looked at her, the look of a man who had seen too much, as if he had peered straight through her and found something even she didn't know was there. A soft sound broke the stillness. The door creaked open. Damian stood in the doorway, coat dusted with snow, his face half-shadowed beneath the warm light. Without a word, he gestured for her to follow. She hesitated, then obeyed. They walked through the dim corridors until they reached the terrace above. The balcony doors opened, cold air rushed in, snowflakes scattered and vanished on contact with their skin. Damian stood there, leaning slightly on the railing, the moon catching in his dark hair and gray eyes. Cold, deep, full of secrets. "Isn't it cold, Mr. Moretti?" she whispered. He turned, his voice low, deliberate, almost heavy. "No need to call me Moretti, Isabella." The world shattered in silence, her breath caught. Every muscle froze. She stared at him, uncomprehending. "What did you call me?" "Isabella Rossi," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Your real name, the last heir of the Rossi bloodline." A gust of wind tore through the balcony, scattering the snow. She stumbled back, gripping the rail. In her mind, the past erupted. Flames, screams, the smell of burning steel. Her grandmother's trembling voice whispered from the dark, "Run, Isabella, don't look back." A tear fell, lost among the snow. "She lied," she whispered. "She said my parents died in an accident. But I remember the shots, the smoke, a man laughing." Damian was silent for a moment. When he finally spoke, his tone was quieter, weighted with something almost human. "It wasn't an accident. Rafael D'Amato killed them. The Rossis and the Morettis once ruled the South together, until that night." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't know anymore," he said softly. "Whether what I see before me is a threat or fate." The wind howled, catching her hair, tangling it with his breath. The space between them shrank, fragile, electric. "We carry two names," he said, voice low. "Rossi and Moretti, once side by side, then buried together, and now only we remain." She met his gaze, her eyes shining with something like defiance. "Maybe she whispered. We weren't born to destroy each other. Maybe we were meant to finish what they began. Damian's eyes softened just for an instant. Maybe, he murmured. Or maybe that's what makes it dangerous. They stood there in silence, between snow and moonlight, between what was lost and what was yet to come. The world seemed to hold its breath as the storm wrapped around them. Between darkness and dawn, between two bloodlines once drowned in fire, a single thread was spun, fragile, invisible, and impossible to sever. Snow kept falling that night, heavy and soundless, as if the world itself had paused. When Isabella stepped back inside, Damian remained on the balcony, his shoulders dusted white. No one knew what thoughts ran behind his eyes, but in that stillness, the power in him felt tempered by something dangerously close to fear. 3 days later, his world erupted. 2 warehouses destroyed, 3 advisors dead, a hidden power plant breached. Everything happened within 48 hours. Coordinated, precise, merciless. Rafael D'Amato's mark burned through every piece of chaos. Damian worked non-stop, inside a subterranean command center only a few miles from the mansion, a place carved beneath the earth, lined with walls of glowing monitors. His voice was rough from hours without rest. Trace the leak. Who fed them the root data? Marco's fingers flew across a keyboard. We're narrowing it down, boss. Could be one of the surviving advisors. Damian didn't answer. He knew this precision meant one thing: a hand inside his empire. While war burned outside, inside the Moretti mansion, Isabella Rossi lived within quiet confinement. The West Wing was sealed, guarded like a fortress. Only Dr. Victor Hale, Damian's trusted political strategist, was allowed entry. Victor was the image of composure, soft-spoken, intelligent, polished. His presence was like silk drawn over steel. He brought her books, tea, and words carefully chosen to disarm. It must be lonely here, he said one afternoon as snow drifted past the windows. Isabella nodded faintly. I understand why he keeps me here. Damian doesn't trust anyone, not even the one who saved his life. Victor's lips curved slightly. You don't resent him for that? No, she murmured. If I were him, I'd do the same. He tilted his head, his tone casual but probing. I heard you overheard something that night in the gardens. Her breath hitched. You know about that? Damian mentioned it, he replied smoothly. He trusts you, you know. I do too, but I'd like to understand what you heard. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. They were planning to plant explosives at the curve, and they mentioned someone, the diplomat. They said he was the insider, the one who'd make sure it worked. Victor set down his cup with calculated slowness. The diplomat, he echoed. His tone remained calm, but his eyes flashed cold. A familiar ghost. They say he trades secrets to both sides, for the right price. A chill crawled up her spine. You think he's real? Victor smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. In our world, my dear, everyone is real if you pay enough to find them. When he left, the silence felt heavier. Isabella stood still, uneasy. There had been something too careful about his questions, too empty about his parting smile. Meanwhile, in the underground command center, Damian scanned decrypted transmissions intercepted from D'Amato's channels. The same name appeared repeatedly, the diplomat, source internal. His pulse hardened. Only one man in his ranks had the access and the cunning to play both sides. Victor Hale. Marco saw his face change. Boss, call the mansion, Damian ordered. his voice low, dangerous. "Alert the West Wing, double security, now." But before the order left the room, the floor trembled. A deep, concussive roar tore through the air, dust falling from the ceiling, lights flickering. Damian froze, instinct tightening every muscle. He knew that sound, an explosion, close. "Where?" he barked. A voice shouted back. "Thermal surge detected. Coordinates match the mansion. West Wing, sir." Damian didn't wait. He snatched his coat and ran through the steel corridors, Marco right behind him. Outside, snow whipped violently in the storm, but in the distance, through the white, he saw it, a bloom of orange fire rising against the night sky. As his car tore up the mountain road, the air reeked of smoke and burning wood. He didn't think, he didn't feel. Only one word hammered in his mind: Isabella. When he reached the gates, the scene was chaos. Guards shouted orders, flames roared from the West Wing. Damian pushed past them, through corridors thick with heat and smoke. The air seared his lungs, his vision blurred, and through the haze, amid the collapse of stone and steel, he saw her. A small, broken figure amid the wreckage, hair tangled, skin coated in ash and dust. He ran, his voice raw as it tore through the noise. "Isabella!" The heat and smoke were so thick that every breath felt like glass tearing through his throat. Damian pushed through the debris, stumbling down a corridor swallowed by fire. Small explosions rippled in the distance, sparks streaking the air like red shrapnel. He saw nothing but smoke, heard nothing but the pounding in his chest. "Isabella!" A faint sound answered, fragile, lost under the roar of flames. He turned sharply, sprinted toward it, and dropped to his knees beside a small, motionless figure curled on the scorched floor. Her hair was tangled with blood and dust. Her hands trembled when he touched her. "Isabella, can you hear me?" She coughed weakly, eyes fluttering open. "Damian." "Don't speak," he said, voice rough. "Save your breath. I'm getting you out." He lifted her, weightless, fragile, barely alive. Another blast shook the hall. The ceiling cracked and a concrete slab fell. Damian twisted, shielding her, pain ripping through his shoulder as debris slammed into him. The air reeked of smoke and iron. Moving on instinct, he found the service corridor, the one that led to the old wine cellar. A gust of icy wind seeped through the cracks. He kicked open the wooden door, and snow rushed in, cold and merciful. They fell into the white, coughing, alive. He laid her down on the snow, stripped off his coat, and wrapped it around her trembling form. His hands were bleeding. Steam rose from his skin in the freezing air. Isabella coughed hard, clutching the coat, voice breaking. "There was someone inside. I heard footsteps before it went off." "Victor Hale?" he demanded. She nodded faintly. He was heading toward the basement stairs. Then, the light. Rage ignited behind Damian's eyes. The pattern was clear now. The questions, the timing, the explosion. Victor hadn't fled. He'd orchestrated it. "He wanted to bury you," Damian said coldly, "along with his secret." Isabella met his gaze, her eyes blurred from smoke, but burning with something fierce. "And yet, you came back." Damian looked at her, expression unreadable. "I don't let anyone take what's mine." The silence that followed was long, filled with the crackle of distant fire and the low hiss of wind. Then she whispered, "Am I yours, Damian?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against the cold air. "I don't know," he murmured, "but tonight, if I hadn't come for you, you'd be dead, and I couldn't live with that." His words, rough and raw, struck something deep inside her. Between the firelight and falling snow, they looked at each other, two silhouettes framed by ruin, breathing the same smoke, sharing the same silence. Fear had melted into something far more dangerous. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, fire trucks, security, the sound of salvation and aftermath. Damian helped her to her feet, one arm steadying her shoulders. "We have to go. He won't stop after this." She looked at the burning mansion, her voice trembling. "That was your home." His reply was cold steel. "Homes burn, empires don't." The armored vehicle sped through the mountain road, snow whipping past the windows. Behind them, the Moretti mansion blazed like a dying sun. Damian glanced in the rearview mirror, the reflection of the flames dancing in his eyes. Not grief, but purpose. Beside him, Isabella sat quietly, still shaking. But when she met his gaze, she understood. Something had begun between them that neither fire nor fear could undo. At the base of the mountain, Damian's grip tightened on the wheel, his voice a low growl. "From this moment on," he said, "we don't run from D'Amato." He looked ahead into the darkness. "We hunt him." And in Isabella's eyes, faint and bright against the storm, burned the same fire, the light of those who had lost everything and found only each other. That night, the armored car tore through the storm, leaving the burning mansion behind. But the war hadn't ended on that hill. It had only begun. 2 hours later, Damian, Marco, and Isabella reached an old underground base, hidden beneath the mountain. A bunker built by Damian's father as an emergency command post. The steel doors sealed shut behind them, the echoes sounding like chains locking away the past. Smoke clung to their clothes and hair. Marco's shoulder was bleeding, but he stood guard, scanning the perimeter through thermal scopes. "No tracking signals, boss, but we shouldn't stay till dawn." Damian nodded, eyes fixed on the central screen. A satellite feed showing the ruins of the mansion. Amid the flickering flames, movement appeared, heat signatures, advancing information. "They're coming back," he muttered. Marco tensed. "D'Amato's men?" Damian's jaw hardened. "Not just them, someone's leading them." A noise echoed down the hall, footsteps measured and metallic. Damian turned, gun raised. From the shadows emerged Victor Hale, his coat torn and stained with ash, half his face lit by flickering light. "Put the gun down, Damian," he said calmly, his tone sharp as a blade. "I'm here to end this." Marco moved, but Victor drew faster, his Glock aimed squarely at Isabella. "You," he said, smiling thinly. "You have no idea how valuable you are. Raphael wants you alive, for leverage. I'm not sure I share his patience." "Drop it, Victor," Damian growled. Victor's smirk deepened. "You still think you control the board? No, Damian, you're the son of a dead legend. I'm the man rewriting his empire." The shot came first from Marco. The bullet tore through Victor's shoulder, spinning him back with a cry. And then, explosions thundered overhead. D'Amato's forces had breached the mansion. Fire and smoke cascaded through the tunnels like a storm. Damian pulled Isabella close. "Where's the exit?" Her eyes flickered, memory flashing through smoke and fear. Her father's voice, long ago. "Every fortress needs a lion's escape." She gripped his hand. "This way." They raced down the corridor, the air thick with dust and heat. The main stairwell was gone, buried in rubble. Isabella veered left into the library. She ripped down a massive tapestry depicting a lion hunt, revealing a hidden stone door. "Here." They forced it open. A spiral staircase descended into darkness, damp and metallic. Gunfire echoed above as they slipped into the passage. The flicker of fire painted their path crimson. At the bottom, Damian keyed in a code. The steel door slid open to reveal a command room, modern and untouched. Screens blinked awake, the hum of machinery cutting through the silence. It was his father's secret nerve center, the true heart of the Moretti Empire. On the main display, security feeds showed Victor Hale leading D'Amato's men inside, his eyes gleaming in the inferno. Damian's hand trembled slightly on the keyboard. Enough. He entered the final command. A mechanical voice echoed, Protocol Omega, counterstrike sequence initiated. Outside, the ground trembled. Automated turrets emerged from hidden towers. The forest erupted with gunfire and light. D'Amato's soldiers fell like shadows torn apart by flame. Beside him, Isabella stood motionless, her fear burned away. The red light of the screens washed over her face, calm, resolute, strong. "My father once told me," she said softly, "loyalty isn't written in blood. It's written in the choice of who you stand beside." Damian turned, his eyes meeting hers, and in that look was something unspoken, a promise born from fire. When dawn broke, the first light cut through the haze of smoke. The Moretti mansion stood silent amid the ruins, its scorched walls still smoldering, the air thick with iron and ash. Damian's men moved across the grounds, clearing debris. The cold morning wind swept through like a quiet absolution. In the shattered grand hall, Victor Hale knelt, hands bound behind him. His coat was torn, face streaked with soot and blood, yet his eyes burned with pride. He looked up at Damian and smiled, a thin, poisonous smile. "So this is how it ends," Victor rasped. "Kill me, and you'll become exactly what you swore you'd never be. A monster just like your father." Damian stepped closer, his voice steady, almost calm. "My father built an empire on loyalty," he said. "You destroyed it out of envy." Victor let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "Envy? Perhaps. I built everything. Your networks, your power, your influence, only to watch you inherit it all because of your name. I couldn't live in your shadow." Damian studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "And so you chose to stand with the serpent?" Victor's smirk returned, faint and defiant. "The serpent knows how to wait, but maybe this time I waited too long." Marco raised his weapon, eyes fixed. Damian's voice was low but final. "The old dynasty dies here. You don't belong in the new one." The gunshot echoed through the hollow hall. Victor fell, his smile fading as silence reclaimed the room. It was over, heavy, inevitable, but strangely peaceful. From the shadows, Isabella stepped into the light. Her face was streaked with ash, her hair tangled, but her eyes glowed with quiet strength. She looked toward the sunrise, spilling through the broken windows, her expression proud, unyielding, reborn. Damian approached her, his voice softer now. "Your family's debt has been paid." She turned to him, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. "Ours," she said. "We paid it, together." He met her gaze, and for the first time, saw his reflection not in glass or flame, but in her eyes. There were no hierarchies now, only two survivors standing on the same ground. Outside, the sky cleared, blue and wide. The mansion, though broken, still stood. Beneath its charred stones, a new dynasty was taking root, not from power or blood, but from trust and the choice to rebuild side by side. As they stepped onto the balcony, the wind carried the last traces of smoke into the morning. Isabella looked out at the rising sun and whispered, "In a world of shadows, sometimes a single whisper can change the fate of an empire."